I had a question come up whether I use spectrum analyzers for Dolby Atmos mixing, and the answer is yeah, sort of. So I'm going to show you today how I do that for Atmos and just talk about spectrum analyzing in general, just some of my thoughts on it, because I've been doing this a long time. Before I jump in on this, just want to let you know, if you're new to the channel, there are some affiliate links below. There are some templates that I have available. Using those links and checking stuff out, it just helps support me, helps support the channel, and I appreciate it. So let's jump in on this. Spectrum analyzers. I've used a spectrum analyzer when mixing for a very, very long time. Definitely have some thoughts on that. I do use it for Atmos, but the way I use it for Atmos is the same way I use it for stereo. So before we get into some thoughts and tips on this, let me show you the technical side of the setup for this. So I'm in an Atmos session right here. The way I use the analyzer is I use it off of the 2.0 Direct. So basically the stereo. And the reason I use this is because, well, number one, it's really hard to do a spectrum analysis of Atmos. I mean, I suppose I could grab one of my measurement mics and put it up here in the room and start measuring that way. But then at the same time, that's just a mono mic and it's going to kind of all sum together anyways. So it doesn't really matter. So in the end, it's always going to analyze some sort of fold down. So I just use the stereo fold down to do the analysis. And I have a couple of different ways that I do this. The primary way that I analyze the spectrum is I use a piece of software called Smart. I've used this for over 20 years. And I'm just used to the way the analyzer works. And that's something that I think is really important, is really understanding your analyzer. But that's why I use this. It's an external piece of software. They're not on version 8. I'm running version 8. They might be on 9 or 10. I have the latest version on my laptop that I use when I'm out doing calibrations, but when I'm working in my studio and I'm actually mixing, I use the older version because, well, Rational Acoustics keeps changing the way the averaging works. And the averaging of this is very, very important to me. But I'm getting ahead of things. So on this Stereo Direct, I have two aux sends here. I have a stereo send right here. This is labeled master. It's probably master because I was probably using it to print mixes at some point. You know, in Pro Tools, you can just right click on that and hit bounce. Didn't know if you knew that little trick, but that's probably why that was in here. And then I have this aux that goes to Smart. This is just a mono aux. I pull it down 6 dB because we're summing stereo to mono and it would jump up. And I'm not going to explain the way dB addition works, but it's down 6 dB and then that goes digital. I think I'm using the aux IO in Pro Tools. It goes digital over to Smart. I usually have it running on the monitor that I have over there if I want to look at it. I don't turn it on right away, but if it's running, it's over there. The other thing I do is I have a master fader in here. It's right here. It's just labeled analyzers. It's getting that master aux right there. And I use this for whatever analyzers I am currently using. Let's talk about strategies for actually using an analyzer and like making it work for you. I kind of talked a little bit about this already, but one of the big important things about using an analyzer is you have to understand the information that that analyzer is presenting you, because they are not all the same. And just to give you an example here, let's go down. Let's look at some pink noise here. So I've got pink noise on a track here, just a signal generator. And here's Pro Q4. This is their analyzer that's built in. And one of the things you'll notice right off the bat is it kind of is sloping upward. If I change the tilt on this, because you can see right away, they are tilting this. They're tilting it 4.5 dB per octave. They're kind of tilting it up. If I turn that to 0, you can see that this pink noise starts to slope down. If I grab my analyzer of choice, Smart, right away here, we can see that it's pretty flat. And let's change this averaging so that we can kind of see what's going on a little faster. If I change the banding in here to none, this is actually what pink noise measures as. Pink noise is random noise that is equal power per octave, which is different from white noise. White noise is equal power per frequency. If I just switch this to white noise real quick, you can just see right there, it tilts up. If we go back to here, all right, this will be easier for you to see. If I switch back to pink noise now, you're going to see everything starts tilting downward as the frequency rises. And pink noise, we tend to prefer pink noise. If you're going to listen to something, pink noise kind of represents the way we perceive sound a little more accurately than white noise. Just something to keep in mind. When it comes to what this actually means for an analyzer is we need to understand what information is that analyzer actually presenting us with. So with Pro Q4, for example, it defaults to that 4.5. So this is pink noise. And if we look at Smart right now, that's different. If I go to the white noise again, we get an even steeper tilt. So you have to understand your analyzer. Personally, I tend to prefer pink noise to display flat because that sort of works a little more like my ear. So in Smart, I set the banding. Generally, when I'm mixing in here, I have it at 1/24th of an octave. I mean, you could go to 1/48th, but I usually am at 1/24th. With Pro Q4, if I use the analyzer, in most cases, I have it off. But if I am using it, I usually just leave it in the default because that representation, if I am equalizing a vocal, for example, that tilt makes a little more sense where you might want to have a vocal sit. So again, what information is that analyzer presenting you? You have to understand the analyzer you're using. Now, another big thing with analyzers is averaging. I like to average things quite a bit. If I turn off the averaging right now and I just have pink noise going into this, it's really fast. It bounces around. Let's pull up a mix here. All right, so I have the chorus of a song running right here. With the analyzer like this, what is this? This just doesn't mean anything to me. I can't understand it. It's bouncing around too much. This doesn't really give me an idea of the overall frequency spectrum. Faster analysis for me might be helpful, though, if I'm maybe trying to de-ess a vocal and I want to see right where those S's are, because when somebody hits an S, it will pop up right in that range, and I can see that, although using an RTA or real-time analyzer for that is not always the best. Sometimes using something that's like a spectrograph, this can be a little more helpful for de-essing because you will see frequency over time. So the white on this is the hotspot. Different spectrograms or spectrographs, whatever they call them, they will have different colors. You have to learn what the colors mean for the one you're using. But for finding frequencies and things like that, maybe you want to find the fundamental of a kick drum, for example. Here, let's solo the kick drum. So this is going to be around the fundamental. I know you can't hear anything today. We're not going to do any copyright stuff and deal with that. And that's fine. Kick drum fundamental is going to be right around here. Other things I can adjust in here are sort of the volume limits of things. And you've got to set all this stuff to where it makes sense for what you want to look at. Again, know your analyzer. When I'm doing a mix. And so here's an example. So with the RTA now with that kick drum, we're seeing a lot of movement. But I generally in Smart, or at least this version of Smart, I set it for a 5-second average when I'm mixing. And if I get a whole mix running, it gives me sort of an average that I'm used to. The other thing I like about Smart is I can put up kind of a target curve. And these are curves that I have made myself. And I can kind of see where things are sitting relative to that target curve. But I wouldn't recommend purchasing Smart just for the analyzer. I think they do have an analyzer only version now, which maybe that would be worth it. For me, if I didn't have anything, I would probably do this. But the power in Smart is more in the dual FFT, which is very, very useful for doing speaker calibrations and loudspeaker tuning and things like that. That's why I have Smart, because I do that kind of stuff sometimes. Smart's not the only thing I use. I also have some other analyzers in here, and I just have a window configuration that I can go to that will pull up the analyzers that I want, and it just drops them right on that monitor over there. Because for analyzers, meters, that kind of stuff, I don't live by them. They are guides. They can kind of give me an idea of where I'm at. But at the end of the day, I really want to use my ears. I am more dependent on comparing what I'm hearing off of my mix to another reference mix. I want to go back and forth sonically and listen to it with my ears. But sometimes looking at an analyzer can help me get in the ballpark. One of the plugins that I've been using that I like for analyzing these days is this True Balance from Sonable. You can load in reference tracks and it kind of gives you a good idea of things. Now, one of the downsides I find to plugins like this, or what's another one? Tonal Balance from Isotope. So Tonal Balance is another one. Bass heavy. Why is that the default here? We'll do that. When I've used this, I usually like the fine, but it gives you a lot of information. What other ones? I've got some other stuff stored in here. We're doing CCM today. So the problem that I have with some of these analyzers when you load in a track is I don't understand exactly what they're looking at in that track when they're kind of building these curves. I mean, if I look at some of these other ones, I don't know what it looked at. Like, I know what track I probably used. Like, this was probably Def Leppard, but I don't know what part of it it's looking at. And for me, when I'm doing spectrum analysis on something, I am typically looking at kind of the loudest, most full frequency section of a song. So generally one of the choruses, and usually one of the later choruses where everything's going to be in and the song is going to be getting big. With this, it's probably more like an average of the whole thing, if I had to guess. If you're more familiar with the Isotope one than me, please let me know if there's something that I don't know about how all this works. But that's just been my experience. These tend to be harder for me to use sometimes. I do go in a lot of the time and I change the averaging. So like in here, I've got the averaging at 10 seconds. The one that I like, if I'm going to look in the software side, is I tend to prefer this Sonable one these days. I think it does a pretty good job. And, I can see in here, I'm like right in the line, whatever that means. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. That's just what's measuring. This doesn't tell you how good your mix is. It just gives you kind of a sense of how it compares to something else from a frequency balance spectrum. So this is, and again, like part of it to me, this is a strange looking curve. One of the things I do like about this is if I see something in here and I'm like, what frequency is that? You can slide one of these around to like go, oh, it's right. It really is right at 2 point, or it's 1.5K, which, especially if you're down here, like in your lower mids, it's a little harder to really know where is something. But I think that was one of the reasons I like this, was I can use that. But I don't use that very often. And if I am using this, it's just off on the side. Another one I use still is this Paz one. Again, the response is set pretty slow. I think you can go slower. Yeah, you can go even slower. But I think it's around 1200. But, you have to look at things on these analyzers. This analyzer, to me, is a little closer to the one in Smart. The downside to this particular analyzer for me, though, is I can't put a target over it. And just looking at it, it's like, what does it mean? I don't know. It's got a bunch of frequencies. That's really what it means. Without a reference, it's hard to see where do you actually sit. I have hopes that one day Waves will update this. Waves, if you're watching, let's talk. I've got ideas. But I used this for a long time before I had access to some other things. So this is one that you can definitely still use these days, though. I tend to use True Balance. Sometimes I will use Insight from Isotope, but I'm not crazy about the spectrum analyzer in it. Anyways, that's just some thoughts, some things to think about with an analyzer. If you're going to do spectrum analysis, learn your analyzer, understand what does something good, or what does something that is a target for you, what does that look like in your analyzer, so that you can actually use the analyzer the best. I like slowing down the averaging because I feel like that is a better representation of our hearing. But, your mileage may vary. Do you use a spectrum analyzer? Do you have a favorite plugin? Please leave a comment below, especially if you can put a target curve in that, because I am always looking for new analyzers. What I really want is to have the analyzer that's in Smart that I use all the time. I really wish I had a plugin version of that. That would simplify things a bunch, but that's how I use analyzers for Atmos and Stereo. So questions, comments, other things you want me to talk about, please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.